Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we have another book review, another fantasy book, and we're continuing our buddy read, which was with A Song of Ice and Fire series and the second book called A Clash of Kings. Now, for the ones that don't know, I've reviewed the first book, which is A Game of Thrones, very famous, everyone probably knows. So if you haven't seen that review, go check it out. The thumbnail is over here and the cards as well. Just click on them and you'll be directed to it. Watch it, know what I have to say about this first book before you jump into the second book, and also to help the channel, give some views and comments, hopefully. But as I say in that video, this is actually my first reread of this series. And this is also the buddy read that I've been doing with my friends, and after finishing The Wheel of Time, so we decided to go into A Game of Thrones. And it's been great so far, especially because rereading it brings so many different experiences, and especially for two reasons. One of them is because I haven't read it in a long time, more than 10 years ago. I think when last time I read this was before the Dance of Dragons had come out. And the second factor is that I read these in Portuguese, the Portuguese edition of them, and it is quite different reading in Portuguese versus English, especially because Portuguese has the editions split into two books, each one of the English books. So it's kind of different, and I'll go into it more in detail later on in the review, but for now, yeah, just take that into account. Let's first talk about the details of this book. A Clash of Kings, like I said, is the second book of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is most famously named for the first book, which is A Game of Thrones, also thanks to the TV show that it got adapted to. And it's written by George R.R. Martin. This is an epic fantasy series that was published in 1998, and it was nominated for a few awards back then, and one of them, which was the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel. The other ones it didn't win, but being nominated was pretty good already. And besides, like I said in the first review, the fact that it gained so much popularity doesn't really need any of the awards. Over the years, and thanks to the TV show, this book has been able to gather over 988,000 ratings on Goodreads, and it has an average score of 4.42 out of 5, which is great, especially considering the amount of ratings that it has. And also considering that because of the TV show, a lot of people that don't usually read fantasy will go and try to read this book and might not even like it, but of course the score shows that even for such a big crowd, the quality of this book is still quite high. Now, before I jump into the actual review of this book, let's just go through two housekeeping items. The first one is the synopsis. I'm going to narrate it to you. If you don't want to hear it because you know everything that it involves, skip to the timestamp, or even because you don't want any spoilers, you haven't read this book yet and you're very keen to just read it fresh, skip to the timestamp and you'll jump right into the first category of the review. Otherwise, stick around and I'll narrate it to you, and it will be very quick. Let's go. Throughout Westeros, the cold winds are rising, from the ancient citadel of Dragonstone to the forbidding lands of Winterfell. Chaos reigns as pretenders to the Iron Throne of the Seven Kingdoms stake their claims through tempest, turmoil, and war. As a prophecy of doom cuts across the sky, a comet the color of blood and flame, 5 factions struggle for control of a divided land. Brother plots against brother, and the dead rise to walk in the night. And that is it for Synopsis. Now, our last thing to look at before we jump into the review is the score I gave for the first book, just so we have some context of where I think the strengths or the weaknesses are. And in this case, there's not really much weaknesses because the score the previous book got was a 5 out of 5. So all the categories got 5s for me, which show that for a first book, it's really strong. It has so many good qualities about it that I can't really pinpoint, oh, this is really bad or this could be better. I thought overall, great. And that really helped to make this reread a pleasure and to just jump into the second book running. So just like that, let's jump into the second review, starting with plot. As per usual with this series, we follow several POVs, and they're all located in different places, quite distant from each other, which gives us an overview not only of the world, but also of the plot, seeing where all the pieces are being changed. And believe me, there's a lot happening. And even though they might be distant in terms of physical distance, they are still going to be impacting each other quite highly, quite strongly, I mean, because one action definitely affects some other action over there. So there's always these implications and those networks happening between the different plot lines. And I mean, I think that's one of the greatest things of plot in terms of A Song of Ice and Fire, is the fact that they are all connected, and the actions of one character, no matter how small they might be, will create this butterfly effect and actually impact these characters that are so distant and think they have nothing to do with it, and end up actually suffering or benefiting from it. And it might not even be immediately, as even though there are still some actions that impact others immediately, but the actions might impact others in the end of the book, in other books even. So there's this multi-scale of consequences and actions, and that makes the plot very engaging, because you don't know if this small thing that happened might actually have impacts much later on. And the thing is, just when you think you see where the plot is going, or you think you have a good grasp of it and nothing can really surprise you, George R. R. Martin is able to twist it so hard that it will leave you surprised, it will leave you flabbergasted, it will leave you very shocked, mouth open, jaw agape. So be ready. I mean, you already have a sense of it if you've read the first book, but the second book doesn't shy away from it. And believe me, none of these sound out of place or they feel out of place, because on a reread, I could totally see what was happening, and I could see the pieces all being placed so that those big plot twists would make sense and wouldn't feel like a out of left field. It's like watching a chess game being played at a worldly level. I think it's an amazing plot work, both at an individual level and also at the world level. He is able to progress both, and progress both well, which is quite important. So for this category, it's going to be a 5 out of 5. Leaving the plot behind and jumping into characters, which truly, they're never really fully separated from each other, because they influence each other in good books. In A Clash of Kings, we followed the development of many characters that we've seen from the previous book, but we also get some additional characters in this one. And I mean additional perspectives. I think this has two sides. One of them benefits the author, the other one not so much. On one side, we do get to see parts of the plot that we weren't privy to, or we didn't have access because none of the characters from the first book were with those other characters that were quite important, so now we get access to that. But at the same time, it's the constant having to adapt to new characters, which some people don't enjoy that. They prefer to go with the same characters from book 1 till the end of the series. For me personally, it was okay. I think there weren't that many new perspectives that I had to adapt too much to them. And because I had read it before, I've seen the TV show, I knew exactly what characters they were, and I could easily catch up to it. Aside from that, we keep good character development throughout the book for most of the characters. Although I did feel that some of these were a bit slower, in the sense that it seemed like we were dragging a bit their development, but that might be because I know where they're going to end. So it does feel like they're just being dragged a bit too much in this book, which was stealing some enjoyment from my rereading, but at the same time, I understand that it might just be because I'm rereading it. One of the characters that keeps increasing in my scale of enjoyment is Caitlin, which I'm very surprised. I don't know why in the first book, in the first reread, I didn't enjoy her perspective as much, but I do feel like I'm at a different life stage. I've had so many more experiences in life that Caitlin somehow is really engaging, and I like to read what's happening to her. Whereas, for example, Arya and Jon Snow in this book, they definitely decreased a bit. They're still high above some characters, but I think they were the ones that suffered the biggest decrease. But I think that's also the beauty of the book and the magic of this author, is that your opinion of these characters is able to change from book to book and from reread to reread. But nonetheless, you still feel compelled to read more and know more of these characters and see where they're going. So for this category, it's going to be a 4 out of 5, but it's a high 4. And halfway through, we should talk about world building. From comets in the sky to castles that have been abandoned, this book explores a whole range of things, and it does so brilliantly to make you feel you are immersed. And it's funny how my memories of this story have changed so much because of the TV show. Because one of the things I did not recall at all was the comet. One of the things that I didn't recall at all was the comet. And the comet is quite prevalent in this book. The characters are constantly mentioning it. It doesn't really play a role per se, but it affects the character development and the plot. And I think that makes it a brilliant piece of world building because, yeah, it's part of the world. It doesn't affect directly things, but its presence makes characters think differently. And I know that despite what I just said, which I think means that it's really good, I did think that the world building for this book in specific wasn't as magical or as fantastical as in the first book. I think it became a bit more realistic. I'm not sure how to explain it well because yes, there is still magic, there is still fantasy, but for some reason it felt a lot more grounded in reality. Which, I mean, it might be good for some people, it might be bad for others, that is very subjective. For me it was okay, but I think that's mostly the reason I'm gonna give this category a 4 out of 5. But then again, it's a high 4, it's almost a 5. It's just that there was something throughout that I was like, we are seeing a bit more of the same and it's not bringing anything really new. And now we move to writing style, and Martin's prose continues being immersive, like I keep saying. It's engaging, it's captivating, and it's brilliance. If you're a plot-driven person, a character-driven person, or even a writing style-driven person, you're gonna get your fill. You'll be learning about this world through the characters' eyes. You will see these characters grow from the highest points to the lowest, and I'm sure you'll never get bored. Okay, you might get a bit bored with some characters that you don't enjoy as much, but it will still be overall a positive experience. And in this book, we actually get a final epic battle scene, which we didn't get in the first one, and it's not much of a George Martin thing to do and have these epic scale battles, even though it's an epic fantasy book. So it's good to have one. But I mean, it's not long in number of pages, I think around 50 pages or so. So it's something that happens quite shortly, but of course, everything has a huge impact on many characters. And the good thing about the writing style is that, for example, in this battle, you're not only rooting for both sides because you understand characters on both sides and you don't want them to suffer, you want them to win, but of course it's impossible for both sides to win. And that's the good part, is that George Martin knows how to deliver to you a no-win situation. Instead of being a win-win, no characters win. And I think the way he ends each of these characters in this book, it's perfect to make you want to jump right into the next book and read it right away. So for this category, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. And finally, we're talking about enjoyment, our last category. And like I mentioned at the start of the review, the first time I read this book was in Portuguese. And the Portuguese editions are actually split each book into 2. And I didn't really read these books, the 2 books that correspond to A Clash of Kings, in a row. So I read the first half, and I don't know how long after I read the second half. So in my head, I think of this book as a bit boring in the first half and then a lot happening in the second. But so reading it all in a row, it's actually a lot more engaging because you can see how things start increasing and to culminate in the battle and in how the characters end in this book. The pacing and the increasing tension are a lot more coherent, or they make a lot more sense in reading it all together. And I know that they split these editions in Portuguese and in other countries just to make more money, which is stupid, but unfortunately I do think that harms a bit the reading experience. And of course, rereading it has been very enjoyable because even though you know what's going to happen, it's really good to see how everything gets to that place. And also just revisiting the world, revisiting the characters. So for this category, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 too. And that leads us to the end of this review. So just as a refresher, we have 5 for plot, 4 for characters, 4 for world building, 5 for writing style, and 5 for enjoyment, which gives us a final score of 4.6 out of 5. It's a bit lower compared to the first book, but I mean, it's still an amazing score. And like I said, the 2 4s are high 4s. Which kind of means that this book could go from a 4.6 to a 5, depending on how much you like the small details that I mentioned throughout the review. Because I mean, maybe it didn't satisfy me to my content, but I do think that both the world building and the characters are still very good, and they still deliver a lot of quality. So do take that into account. And I mean, my score is still higher than the average Goodreads reader, so I think I'm on the good side at looking at this book. But then again, make your judgment. For me, I would definitely recommend it to any fantasy reader. Of course, if you don't like to read very dark or grim things, maybe I wouldn't recommend you this. But either way, I think it's still a good recommendation, even if it's not really your style to read, because it's a good experience and a good example of what this side of fantasy has to offer. Or if you just want to study the way George Martin writes, because it is really good. But tell me, what do you think of this volume? What is your favorite character? Comment down below, let me know. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, like the content, and I shall be seeing you on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.